Today we're going to be building a calculator using jQuery. Let's start by looking at the finished product. As we click on numbers, our selected values will show up in the results section. We then select an operator and we see the operator show up on the next line. We can choose another number now, and when we hit the equal sign, our calculated result shows up. Let's take a look at our boilerplate code now. So it looks like we have a bunch of HTML and Bootstrap, but we don't have any functionality built in yet. On line 80, we see this document.ready function. What this means is that this code will execute once the document is fully loaded. We will be writing our calculator code inside this function. Before we start working on the logic, let's get an understanding of the HTML that we have done for us. Let's go over the classes first. We have some Bootstrap classes, but right afterwards, we also have number classes and operator classes. We're going to be using these classes as our jQuery selector. We'll go over that more later. Right now, it's important to note that we're giving these classes because we want to group them into numbers and operators. Next, we see that they all have values. The reason we are giving these a value is so that when these buttons are selected, we have a point of reference for what number or operator was selected. We also have the equals button and the clear button. Scrolling down to the result panel, we see that we have h1 elements for the first number, operator, second number, and the result. We do not have classes, just an ID. We'll have to remember this as we update these elements when the buttons are clicked. Now let's get started on coding. Remember, we're going to put our calculator code inside the document ready function. The hardest part of coding is getting started. When there are many different parts that we need to think about, it's hard to know exactly where to begin. Let's start by creating variables. We know we're going to need them, but what variables are we going to need? We'll need variables to hold the two numbers that the user selects. We'll go ahead and name those first number and second number. The user will also be selecting an operator. We'll need to store that information as well, so let's create a variable for that. We know that we're going to be getting a result at the end of the calculation as well, so let's create a result variable as well. We're not giving these variables a value just yet because we want them to be dynamic. In other words, they'll be assigned values as the user selects them. Why don't we create that functionality now? We'll start this by creating an onClick listener for the number class selector. The onClick listener is exactly what it sounds like. It's a function that is triggered when the selector is clicked. A quick note about jQuery. The selector should have quotations if we are giving it a literal value. However, we can use a variable as the selector as well, as long as the value of the variable is equal to a class or ID stored as a string. Let's check it out and see if it worked. I'm going to do console.log this.value. Alright, hold on. What is this.value? This is a keyword. It refers to the element with the class number that has been clicked. .value simply means we will be getting the value attribute from the selected element. If we look back at the HTML, we can see that the value attribute of each button element has the value of the number that it represents. Alright, let's open up the browser and take a look. Awesome! We're getting the right values for each selected button. We can now assign this to the variables. We're going to set the variables in the onClick function. On click, first number will be updated to plus equals this.value. Remember, plus equals is the same as first number equals first number plus this.value. It's just JavaScript shorthand. Let's console log first number at the end of each click and check it out. Okay, so we see that we're console logging undefined before the actual value. This is because we're concatenating the values of the selected numbers to the stored value of the variable. If we look back, we haven't defined the value of first number. We can quickly resolve this issue by setting the value equal to an empty string. Let's do it for second number as well. We're using strings because we want to be able to add the newly selected values to the end of the string instead of just adding single-digit integers. Okay, now that we've got that resolved, let's figure out how we're going to differentiate first number from second number using the same onClick function. Let's create a global variable called isOperatorChosen and an if statement to check to see if the newly created variable is true. If the variable is true, we will concatenate the selected number to second number. Otherwise, it'll be concatenated to first number. Awesome. Let's update the DOM element to show what we've got so far. We'll use jQuery to update the targeted DOM elements, which happen to have IDs first number and second number. Let's take a look at what we have so far. It looks like we can choose the first numbers, but nothing happens when we select an operator yet. Let's create the onClick function for when the operator is selected. We're going to change the isOperatorChosen variable to true and set the operator variable's value to this.value. Let's update the DOM element for the operator the same way we did earlier. Our selector this time will be the DOM element with the ID operator. We can now test to make sure that when we select the operator, it shows up. And we can also make sure that the second number is being updated properly as well. Cool! Now that we have that working, let's make the calculator actually show a result. To do this, we need to create the equals onClick function. We're going to start by changing the variable type of the first number and second number from strings to integers. We're doing this now because the user has notified us that they are done selecting any more numbers and is now ready to see a result. We're going to use a JavaScript built-in function called parseInt to help us out here. Next, we're going to create if statements for each of the different operations depending on the operator that was selected and update the result variable. Once we've updated the result variable, we can then update the DOM element for result and check it out. We can see that the calculator works, but now we need to find a way to reset the calculator without refreshing the page. We're going to do this by creating a new function. It will be called initializeCalculator. We're going to reset all of the values here, then we'll clear the DOM elements in the results section. We're going to initialize the calculator at the very bottom. This way the calculator is initialized when the document is ready. We can also remove the empty string from first number and second number because they will be initialized through this function and it is just repetitive. We'll use the clear button as a trigger for resetting the calculator, so we're going to need to create a new onClick function for the clear button. Here, all we have to do is initialize the calculator again. Looks like we have an issue. Let's take a look and see what happened. We spelled initialize calculator wrong and we're getting an error for that. Now that we have all of this completed, I'm going to add a few finishing touches. First, we're going to disable all onClicks once the calculation has been completed, all but the clear button. To do this, we're going to add an isCalculator variable to check if we've run the calculation. We'll set the isCalculator variable to true in the equals onClick function, and we're going to add an if statement that checks if the variable is true, and if it is, we'll just return to quit out of the function right away. And that's it. You've created a functioning calculator.